Today we are starting the Hello Posy Quilt Along. Finally! I've been really eager to start. Okay, so if you're just now hearing about this quilt along, this is Hello Posy. It's what we're going to make together, and you can find the pattern in my book, A Life with Quilts. So it is a beginner-friendly quilt pattern. We're going to walk through pretty much all of it. I'm going to have video tutorials every week. So if this is your first quilt, this is a good quilt to start on. It only really requires one skill, which is straight line sewing and snowball flipping the corners. So not a bad quilt to make as your very first one. This is a 6-week quilt along, so we're going to have a task each week. And this week is week 1, and our task is going to be to choose our fabrics, cut our fabrics, and organize them. So not too bad. I'm going to walk you through a lot of the cutting, and we're also going to deep dive into fussy cutting a little bit, because this quilt, so it has those really, they're not big blocks, but it's pretty nice size to showcase some fabrics that have little special designs on it. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to take that on. I've actually got 2 different ways I'm going to look at it. So we're going to get all the cutting done up front for the whole quilt top, and then after we go through this demo, we'll talk about some prizes and sponsors and how to make sure you're eligible. So with that, let's get started. Okay. So I've already got my 12 fabrics chosen that I'm going to use for my foreground. I still got to pick the center, but these are my flower petals, and these are from my fabric collection called Wholehearted. And I am using a fabric collection, so I'm not really going to be showing you pulling fabrics from your stash like some of the other quilts that I made during this quilt along. So a little bit different. I'm using all of these, which are all made to go together. But I did pare it down, and here are the other pieces in the fabric collection that I'm not using as my foreground. Although I may use that one in my background, I'm not going to be using either one of these 2. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about why. Because they're really pretty, and I really would like to use them in this quilt, but it's just not going to work out. These are my background fabrics. So a whole bunch of different low volumes, which is going to be really cute. But if I was to use one of these, particularly this one, although I might use this one for my background. If I was to use these prints, which really, they're low volume, but they're very busy, which they could stand on their own if you were using them like on a quilt with a solid background. If I was having a solid background, then I could use this fabric as a foreground and it would probably work out okay. But because I'm using a whole bunch of different low volumes, this fabric is not going to stand out as a flower as well as, say, this purple would. This purple, it doesn't matter what background I choose, except for maybe purple, it's going to stand out against its background. So for that reason, I would not use this. And this is usually kind of a hard rule for me on any quilt that I'm making with scrappy background. If I'm using scrappy background, I would never use prints that look like this as my foreground. They will get lost in all of this busyness. So put those aside. These are the 12 that I'm using, and what you can definitely tell is they're all fairly saturated. This one is obviously a little bit light, but I think it'll be dark enough against these to work out. So it'll be a light spot in the quilt, but sometimes light spots are great. So all of these are saturated, and I kind of would have liked to use the solid, but I also want to use these fabrics. So, all right, so that is flower petals sorted. And now I've got to come up with a fabric for the very center. And I like using either a solid or a tonal for this because, you know, it's the very center and it doesn't necessarily have to pop, but I want to know that I'm looking at the flower's center. So I've pulled these fabrics, and I've also pulled, this one's on a bolt, but this purple, because I kind of wanted to use like a dark purple, but I didn't have a dark purple. This one's semi-dark, and I actually don't think I even have enough of it, so it might be a moot point. But I pulled it because I did like the color. I also pulled these. So what I want to do and how I want to decide these, and well, before I go into that, one thing you can definitely tell is there's nothing busy going on. Of course, you can have something busy going on, but I would have the minimal amount of color on a fabric that you can. Let me give you an example. All right, here's 2 fabrics out in left field. This one probably could work because the design is really, really tiny, and the majority of it is this rosy color. You'll have these little yellow spots and little white spots, but the square for the center of these blocks is so tiny that this would work out okay. And this wouldn't be a horrible choice, but it obviously wouldn't be a choice that I would prefer to make because the designs on the fabric are much bigger and that square is so small, and I could get, you know, a bird wing on my flower center, and things like that make me crazy. There are no hard rules, so everything I'm saying here is just take it as a grain of salt. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you or you completely disagree, no worries at all. Always go with your own gut, not by what I say. But I always just share these. I like to share the way I choose fabrics just because I know there's a lot of people who want to know. So I would never choose something this big for that flower center because it is so tiny. This one would be okay. It actually would be okay. Well, no, maybe not. So I need to decide between these four for my centers. And the way I do that is, let me pull all these up here. So this will be in the center. This fabric, whichever one I choose, will be in the very center of every single one of my blocks. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that this center fabric looks good with every single one of these petal fabrics. So this would work. This would work. That would look really good. That would look good. 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 That's the only one that I would kind of be iffy about. I don't think it would look bad, but there's not a lot of contrast going on, which isn't the biggest deal, but it could not be the very best choice I could make. Good, good. I really like it on this purple and this peach. This one's another good color, and this one I'm kind of leaning to because it's such a darker shade of golden brown, but it doesn't mess with that brown. See, it's kind of very different from it. So this fabric would stand out even on this dark fabric, and it'd be okay again on that one. But all the rest of this one would look really good. This one would actually look pretty good with every single one of them, even those. And I don't have a lot of purple in this collection. I just kind of have bits of purple and then these two. So this would bring out that purple a little bit more, which I kind of like the idea of. I don't have a full fat quarter or a full quarter yard of this one. So I need to measure it to even make sure that it's an option for me. But I really like the way this one looks. But one thing to think about is, and I've kind of gotten a better hang of this as I was doing the mock-ups for our bundles in the shop. Every time I did a mock-up, I kind of learned something else about what looks best. And when I use, one thing I've learned for sure is that I don't like white in the center whatsoever. Like, I don't like that at all. So I feel like it really needs to be a color. But this one would darken everything up, whereas this one would brighten everything up. This is that other purple. And now that I see it close together, I like it on every single one of them, except for this one. It's so similar in color. I'm not sure that it would be a big enough contrast for me to be happy with it. So I don't think I'm going to use this purple at all. And I don't think I'm liking this one. It's just, there's no yellow in the quilt, which sometimes can be okay. Like, I don't know if you looked at those bundles I made, but I made this one bundle that had all these neon colors. They were bright. Something I probably wouldn't use in the quilt, but I could see it sold really well. So I know there were people that absolutely loved those kind of fabrics. And I put a out and left field navy blue in the center. And that bundle, or on that mock-up where I had the fabrics placed in the design on the computer, looked so good. And that fabric for the center was kind of just out and left field. And I kind of threw it in there, and because of the mock-up, it made it look so good. And I was just like, well, that would also work. So out and left field for your center, not a bad idea. But I think this is kind of not really out and left field because we've got some goldish happening here, and this is a gold. I think this is Michael Miller gold. So I'm not feeling this one. So we're down to these two. This one would darken up my quilt. This one I think would brighten up my quilt. I'm kind of leaning to this one. But the only thing that's stopping me from going for it is that that's not crazy amount of contrast, but that doesn't seem to always matter when I was doing the mock-ups. So I've got a lot of this and I know I have enough. Let me measure this. Let me look at the pattern and measure this. I'm supposed to have 9 inches for this piece, and I think I have, let's see, I have 8 inches. Let me see if I got enough. I actually have enough fabric to make this work. So now I've really got 2 choices on my hands here, and I don't know which one to choose. I'm kind of leaning to, I don't know, I can't choose. Hold on, I have to think about this a lot off camera. Okay, I think I'm gonna go with the purple, and I'm gonna put this to the side, and it might look good as the binding. I don't usually bind things with high contrast, but that could work out really well, I think. So I'm putting this to the side. I'm going with the dark purple for my center. So yeah, so that's foreground sorted, and let's take a look at our background. All right, so like I mentioned, I've already pulled some fabrics. Oh, this is my lighthearted fabric collection. My next step is to get my fabrics ready for cutting, and I always starch and press my fabrics. So I would always recommend you never cut on a fabric that hasn't been pressed, but if you're super extra like me, you never cut a fabric that hasn't been starched and pressed. My iron's not hot all the way. So I'm going to whip through these really quick, starching and pressing every single fabric that I'm going to use. I'm probably going to break it up into sections because I don't have somewhere to put all of this. So I'm going to do my foreground first, and then I'll get to background last. I'm going to cut my very center fabric, which is fabric B in the pattern, fabric B. And I'm going to do just a quick cutting tutorial, and I kind of found a flaw in my own pattern. It's not really a flaw because it does tell you exactly how many you need, but that fabric B, it tells you that you could have a 1/4 yard or 1 fat quarter. So if you're using the fat quarter, it tells you how many strips to cut, but it doesn't tell you what to cut for the 1/4 yard, and I'm using the 1/4 yard. So you would just half it. So it tells you 8 strips for the cut 8 strips on the fat quarter. If you're using a 1/4 yard, just cut 4 strips. So I don't know how that got past us in the testing phase, but it did. All right, so I'm gonna do a quick cutting tutorial. What we wanna do when we cut fabric is to cut off that starting edge so we can start with a clean edge. And I'm cutting 4 strips, and I'm going to use the markings on my ruler with the markings on my mat. All right, so this is the strip that I want to take off from my fabric, and it is for me to have a clean edge. So what I like to do is I like to find the 1 inch line. Let me actually let you see me doing this. Here's my ruler. Let me turn it this way. Might be easier to show you. This edge to this is 1 inches. There's my 1. And I want to cut this sliver off. And so this to this is my 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that 1 inch on this part, on this line of my mat. So this 1 inch of my ruler is going to line up with that 1 inch of my mat. So I'm never looking at the edge of the ruler. I'm always looking at 1 inch in, always. So I want to line up that 1 inch. See, number 1 is lining up with number 14. I line it up there. And then I also want to come up here to the top, and I want to line it up there. So this 1 inch in is where I always look. And cutting fabric is one of the biggest questions that I always get in my emails and my messages. So if you've got cutting down and you're like, move on, I get it. But let me just show the people who are going to have these questions so that they won't be frustrated and quit on quilting. So this is where I look. I don't look here because you can't see if you've got that in the right place because it's on top of this line. So I want to look at my 1 inch line and line it up with the line of my ruler, with the line of my mat there, and at the bottom. Let me put this back on the tripod. Okay, so I've got my strips cut now. There they all are. Actually, I don't want to move them. I got my strips cut. So I like to use both sides of my mat because I feel like that way I can move my fabric a little less. So that's what I'm going to do. All right. Now we're going to subcut. And I subcut from this side of my mat. So I started here cutting, and then I subcut over here. And I'm going to swap to my little ruler because it's easy to maneuver with little rulers. So now I'm going to subcut this piece, cut the selvage off. Now we've got a straight edge, no selvage, and we can cut this into the squares we need. So I think one of them is different than the others. And again, if you're using the 1/4 yard, so am I. It's just double folded. So we're going to get twice as much from these strips as the instructions tell us to get. Okay, so these are our little extras, and these are all of our little squares for our flower centers. This one strip is cut differently, so, I mean, it's cut the same, but we're cutting a different amount. Let me just make sure I got the right amount. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times 2 is 18. All right, so that is fabric B sorted, and we were left with this little extra. Okay, we're going to do something fun before we do the hard stuff, or the droll stuff, I should say. It's because cutting isn't the most exciting, right? But sometimes it can be. So I want to show you two different things. And this part's not in the pattern, so this is kind of a bonus. All right, so this fabric, you know, it's just a fabric with nothing. I mean, it's really cute, but there's not something super special happening here. So I would just cut this fat quarter exactly the way instructed in the pattern. I would do the same thing for this one too. I would not do that for this one because I'm going to do something cool. So this one's a no, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. So that one's going to be cut special. This fabric, just a basic fabric, nothing special. Going to cut regular. This fabric going to cut regular. This fabric going to cut special. Regular. 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 I am going to cut this one special. And regular. All right, so before I show you something special, I'm going to put my special fabrics to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and cut my strips from these fabric, and then I'm going to subcut them into the appropriate size squares. So let me get done with that real quick. All right, so I've cut these squares. These are scraps, and these are, there was one fat quarter that you had to cut more of than the other ones. So I've done that. And then I'm just going to take a minute and get these organized. It's not that big of a deal to get these organized, but because we're working on a few of these blocks each week, I think that I would like to have them organized so I can just grab and go, or grab and sew. So I'm going to get these organized real fast. All right, for right now, I'm just gonna do little stacks that look like this. And so all of these blocks are gonna look like that. They're all gonna be cute. And they're gonna help the other ones to shine. All right, so that is, we had a lot of scraps left over too, so this is definitely another quilt. Or you could make more blocks and make your quilt bigger. So just a thought. I'm gonna save those, put those back in my stash. So organized, so this is done. So now let's look at the special fabric. Okay, so special because they have fussy cutting opportunities. But I'm going to show you a different way to think about fussy cutting, all right? So I'm sure if you've been quilting for a while, you have fussy cut in a quilt or seen it done, and it wastes a lot of fabric. It is definitely a waste. So I'm not sure that I won't need another fat quarter to make this work, but I'm going to try. So I would have normally cut 2 strips of fabric from this fat quarter, and then I'd have cut that down to squares for my block. But because I want a fussy cut, I'm going to need a little bit more than those 2 squares, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute. And I might be able to make it work with just what I've got, but I do have some backup fabric just in case I don't get this to work with the 1 fat quarter. And let's show you the block. All right, so all right, here's my block. And it has a really big square right there for that petal, and that is a fussy cutting opportunity. Fussy cutting is definitely not necessary, it's definitely extra, but it can make things so much more fun. In the past, I've done extra fussy cutting and then just extra fussy cutting. So I'm gonna show you the extra, and then I'm gonna show you the extra. Let's start with the extra. Let me swap fabrics. Here is my fat quarter. I've got to get 8 squares out of this fat quarter. So I want to kind of start at the top and then work my way around. And what I'm thinking is the very center of that square, these petals, the very center being one of those. So this is just extra fussy cutting. And I would take my fussy cutting ruler and I would place it. That one actually is going to work. So I want to place it, and the way you fussy cut is you want to put the very, where the X marks the very center, I want to put that in the very center of this design when I have it right where I want it. And things that I'm looking at too is that each one of these is in the corner, which is going to be extra cute. When I have it, I just cut it out. So extra time is involved in this, and you're going to waste some fabric, but the end result is going to be really cute. And if I would get my rotary cutting mat out here, I would, this would be easier for me. Let me go get it, hold on. Okay, so I did manage to get all 8 squares out of that fat quarter, so we're good to go. So that is one, or that is actually 2 blocks, but 1 fat quarter down, and it's going to have that in the very center of each of those petals, and it's going to be really cute. Now that I think about it, though, these are actually going to get half cut off, so that's okay. I wasn't thinking about that when I cut it, but that's okay. But that's gonna be cute, right? Let me show you the extra. Okay, so something like this. All right, so I can do the same thing for this one. So this is just extra fussy cutting, right? And I could have a fern in each of my units, and again, each of my units would be boom, 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 each of these units. So if I have a fern in each of those units, that's fussy cutting. But I could also be extra and do this little maneuver. So if I do this, that means that all of my ferns could end up twirling around the whole block. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to cut 4 of these out. I need 8, but I'm going to start with my 4. And I've got ferns going in 2 different directions. So I actually want, I got ferns in this direction, and then I got ferns in that direction. So 2 different directions, boom, boom. And if I they won't spin around if I don't use the same direction in all 4 of the units. So for one block or for one strip, if you're looking at this from the fat quarter standpoint, I'm going to have all these kind of ferns, but in the other one I want these kind. So you can see they're going in different directions. So let me just get these cut out just like this, so on point, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I did not have enough to get both strips cut from this, fussy cutting it this way, and you see this waist. I'm gonna go and see if I can find, I only need two more squares to make this work. I'm gonna go and try to find the 2 more squares. Okay, so scraps. So it waste fabric, you end up with extra scraps. But when I put my block together, it will look like this. Wait a minute. It'll look like that. And it's not needed, but it sure is really pretty. Let me see what the other one looks like. And it's twirling. Yeah, the other one's gonna look very similar, but it'll be going in the opposite direction. Okay, you can't see that one on the screen, but you get the idea. They're gonna twirl. It's really cute. And this print is not gonna be, you know, a huge eye grabber. It's just a little fern. But say on this print, something like this, it's going to be even more grabby. Look, I can have a bird in every square, and the birds can be going around that. And the cool thing about fussy cutting this way on the diagonal is that you don't have to think about having each one of your prints in the correct direction. They're in all 4 directions, which means I can turn that quilt any way I want to, and it'll always look right? Because sometimes if you've got everything, so if I had done this with my bird, and I've got a bird, I can turn that quilt upside down and the birds are in the wrong direction, which might not bother everyone, but it can bother some people. Whereas if I put it like this, the birds swirl around, everything looks like it should look. Everything always looks right. There's no wrong to it. So there's no wrong to any of this, by the way. I'm just kind of playing, basically. But anyway, so on this print, I'm going to do the 4. See, I've got 4 birds in this fat quarter. I'm going to do the 4 birds. And I can do one of these flower, or I can do the butterflies. I've only got 2 butterflies, so I might have to find some more of this print so that I could have the butterflies doing the same thing, which is what I want. So it's like I said, I'm gonna waste a lot of fabric doing this and have too many scraps that I have to deal with later, but I get swirling fussy cut prints. All right, so I'm gonna finish cutting up my quilt, or the foreground at least, and then we'll get to the background. All right, so here is all my background, and I'm going scrappy again. So I'm going with all low volumes, and this is actually my lighthearted fabric collection. I always talk about there being 3 different types of low volumes. You've got your whispery ones that barely have anything going on, which really lightens up your quilt. You've got your middle, which has a little bit more than this one, but not that much more. And then you have your very busy ones, like this, like that one. So I like to always include all 3 types in each of my quilts that have scrappy backgrounds. I wouldn't want to only include busies because it becomes overwhelming and your foreground can't shine, if, in my case, a lighter background. So those are the kind of things that I like to think about when I'm choosing low volumes for this. I want to make sure I have all three kinds, but not a lot of those busies. For my own taste, I don't like anything to be overly busy. So I try to limit how much busy that I actually use. You may be different, and that is just fine. I like to include more of these whispery ones than anything else because they just really lighten everything up, and I think I like that better. All right, so for our background fabric, we're just cutting one size strips, but then we subcut them in different ways. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut all of my strips. Now, I'll take that total of strips, and then I'll just cut a few strips from each one of these fabrics. That's how I kind of break it up. So I won't actually do any math on it. I'll probably start out with 2 or 3 strips per fabric, and then if I need to add a little bit more strips, then I'll just go back and add more. And when I'm keeping a running, I'll keep a running total of how many strips that I use, so that you know, I can keep up, because it's only, you know, it only tells you that you need 2 3/4 yards for your background, but when you're using scrappy background, you have to kind of always do a little bit of math for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of my strips, and then I'm going to subcut them so that I'll have everything ready to go. One more thing, I'm adding this solid in with my low volumes because I like having a solid in the quilt. It just kind of calms everything down. So I just want, in case you saw that and you didn't see it in my fabric layout, I'm adding this white solid to the mix. And I'm ready to cut fabrics for real this time. All right, so we have everything cut and ready to go. Whole quilt cut, yay. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna lay out my blocks so that I can get everything organized and get the pieces. And this way, as we work on these through the weeks, I can just grab and go sew. So that's what I wanna get done. So let me get these laid out real quick. So what we have here is each block's main foreground. So this is A fabric for each block. So there's 25 here, and they all have 4 of the A squares. So that's first. And then if you can just look at your, on page 36 in the book, at the very top, it says each block contains, that's what we're doing here, is we're just getting ourselves organized. So B fabric is going to be your center of your flower, and they each get 4 squares. So I'll just go ahead and put 4 of these on each of my blocks here. All right, so that is all of the organization done, and then we're going to just clip everything together so that as we work through these, like I mentioned, we will just be able to grab and go. So I'm just going to go through here, clipping these all together with my little bindy clips. I'm not going to worry about putting the background with this. You can definitely do that if you prefer it, but I'm just going to focus on my foreground, and then because it doesn't really matter where the backgrounds go, so I'm not gonna organize it. So I'll just kind of grab the pieces that I need as I sew through these each week. But these are the important pieces, so I do want to get those organized. Right, and I'm going to put all of my background tiny squares in this little cup, and then I will be organized. All right, so I can just grab what I need each week to work on this quilt along. Actually, I should have put these on the very bottom. Something like that, or however you want to do yours. And we're ready to go. So, all right, so we're all cut, and we're done with this week's task. I actually broke this up into 2 different days. I did my foreground on one day and then my background on another day. So you may want to break it up too. you've got a whole week to choose, cut, and organize. So, you know, take your time. Do what you can each day, or get it all done real quick, whatever you want to do. So if you go to today's blog post, you'll see what prizes are going to be awarded next Tuesday. So the following Tuesday, from the day this video goes live, we will, I think it's 3 winners, but it's in that blog post. There'll be like 2 to 3 winners, and it shows you what you're going to be winning, and it shows you all the sponsors. To be eligible for these giveaways, you do have to be following our whole list of sponsors, and you have to post your progress on Instagram with the hashtag Hello Posy QAL. So post as many times as you want, and the more you post, the better your odds of winning are. And I think that's all. I will see you next Wednesday.